Imagine being stuck for a full 72 days after a plane crash, in a place where there is nothing but snow all around you. No people, no help, and nothing to eat or drink. Everywhere you look, you only see the shadow of your own death. But then something happens to you that you never expected at all. The story begins on 13 October. It was a normal flight, and all the players inside the plane were very happy. Many of them were traveling by plane for the very first time, and for the first time they were leaving their own country to go to another country. Some of the players' family members were also with them, going along to support their children in the game. After takeoff, when the plane started moving towards Chile through the Andes Mountains, everything was still normal. All the players sitting inside were very happy and were enjoying the view of the snowy mountains from the window seats. But they had no idea that within a few minutes something was going to happen to them that is terrifying even to imagine. After some time, the weather suddenly turned bad. A very strong snowstorm began, and the plane started shaking violently. Because of these jolts, all the passengers began to panic. But one passenger sitting inside explained that when a plane flies over mountains, there is turbulence. In other words, it was not necessarily something dangerous. Soon everything would become normal again. But as the plane moved forward, the turbulence kept getting worse. The aircraft began to shake even more violently. All the luggage inside the plane started falling here and there. Seeing this, chaos spread among the people. The pilots were trying to control the aircraft, but now the plane had gone completely out of control. Before the pilots could do anything, a mountain suddenly appeared in front of them. The aircraft crashed straight into the mountain and split into two pieces. One player was thrown out with the rear part of the plane at the moment of impact and disappeared into the air. The front part of the plane slid forward at high speed and crashed into a huge chunk of ice. The impact was so strong that all the seats of the plane got crushed together. Many people were killed, crushed between the seats. The people who survived the accident somehow gathered themselves and started helping the remaining passengers in the cabin. Some players quickly went to the pilots and tried to pull them out. But during this time, both pilots also died. The situation was extremely painful. There was blood everywhere. Dead bodies were scattered all around. There were a total of 45 people traveling on this plane. But after the crash, 18 people lost their lives and only 27 survived. Because the plane had taken off in the evening, it became night shortly after the crash. The temperature outside started dropping rapidly. The cold had become so extreme that they could not tolerate it. To protect themselves from the freezing cold, they used the available luggage and even dead bodies to plug all the holes in the plane so that the icy wind from outside could not get in. All of them then sat huddled together to keep themselves warm. Their condition was very bad. They were still in deep shock because they understood that they were probably not going to survive. Somehow, they managed to get through the night. When the sun came up in the morning, they saw that 4 or 5 more people had died because of the cold. But the good thing was that the storm had now stopped. The weather outside had become normal again. When they came out of the plane, they saw that as far as their eyes could see, there was nothing but white snow in every direction. They now had to get out of this place as soon as possible because they would not be able to stay alive here for many days. There were no houses nearby, no animals, and no plants from which they could survive. First of all, they removed the plane seats and took them outside so that there would be enough space for everyone to sleep inside the plane. Then they laid the injured people out in the sunlight so that their bodies could warm up. For drinking water, they started melting snow and collecting it drop by drop. After that, they gathered everyone's belongings. Whenever they found something useful, they kept it in a separate suitcase. The bodies of those who had died in the crash were carried away from the plane by some of the survivors, who then covered them with snow. They did this to stop the bodies from decomposing, so that when help arrived, those dead bodies could be taken back with them. Once things had settled a little, they all took a deep breath of relief. All of them were extremely hungry. They divided the remaining food into tiny pieces and gave everyone one small piece each. Of course, this piece of food was very little, but for staying alive, it was just enough. Everyone knew that this food would have to last until help reached them. They believed that by now the government would have learned that their plane had crashed and that they would soon be rescued. So they sat together and waited for help. In reality, the place where their plane had crashed was a valley surrounded by tall mountains on all sides. Because of this, it was not easy at all to get out of there. While they were talking about all this, suddenly a plane flew overhead. Seeing the plane, they all started shouting loudly to show that they were alive. But it was useless because that aircraft was flying at a great height and the people trapped below could not be seen from there. The plane passed right before their eyes and disappeared. A few hours later, night fell again. They put on extra clothes and hid inside the plane. Using the luggage inside, they once more blocked all the holes of the plane. In this way, that night also somehow passed. The next morning, a man named Nando regained consciousness. He had been lying unconscious since the crash. Nando's condition was so bad that he could not even stand on his own feet. But even then, he went to his sister and hugged her. When Nando asked about his parents, he was told that his mom and dad had died. Hearing this, he was devastated. Meanwhile, the others melted snow again, collected a little water and drank it to survive. They also made an X sign on the ground so that any aircraft passing above could see them. After some time, another plane flew over them. Seeing it, they became very happy and tried to catch its attention by reflecting sunlight with pieces of glass. But this plane also ignored them and went away. They were still hopeful, thinking that maybe that pilot had seen them and that help would reach them very soon. But another night passed like this, and still nobody came to save them. Now they realized that no one was going to rescue them here. So they began to think about how they could save their own lives in this closed, isolated place. They remembered that there were some batteries in the rear part of the plane. If they could bring those batteries here, they might be able to power the plane's radio and make contact with the outside world. Everyone liked this idea, but doing this in reality was not as easy as it sounded. The back part of the plane had broken off during the crash, and nobody knew where it had landed. Still, they decided to go and try to find the rear section. They used leather and glass to make some goggles so that their eyes would be protected during strong snowstorms. Then, 4 people from the group set out to bring back those batteries. However, after walking a short distance, when they turned back and looked, they could no longer see their crashed plane. They realized that in this endless white snow, nobody would ever be able to spot their aircraft, and maybe that was why no one had come to rescue them yet. They tried to move forward, but suddenly the snow under them started shifting. Seeing this, they became frightened and returned to the crashed plane. In this way, they had now been stuck there for 6 days. After 1 week, all the remaining food in the plane was finished. The entire area was covered with snow. There were no animals nearby, and no trees or plants. So now, to fill their stomachs, they had to do something. With nothing else to eat, they started scraping off the moss-like layer from the rocks and eating it. Its taste was extremely disgusting, but they were forced to eat it. At this point, Nando said that if he had to eat the bodies of the dead to stay alive, he would do it. Hearing this, everyone fell into deep thought. Soon, a debate broke out among them. Should they eat the bodies of the dead, or should they choose to die of hunger instead? Some people said this was wrong. They believed that if they did this, God would never forgive them. So they decided to somehow get by, holding their hunger. Time went on, and with time, their hunger kept increasing. The situation became so bad that they were forced to chew on shoelaces and even cigarettes. But after being hungry for so many days, how could such things satisfy their hunger? A few more days passed like this, and because of hunger, Nando's sick sister died. Nando had now lost his parents and his sister as well. Time kept moving, and somehow they managed to stay alive for 9 days. But by now, their hunger had grown so much that their minds had almost stopped working. Death was now just one step away from them. They had no other option left, so they finally decided to eat the dead bodies. First, 4 people went outside the plane and began cutting pieces from the corpses and eating them. Seeing them, some others changed their minds and joined them, eating to fill their own stomachs. However, there were 5 people who said they would rather accept death than eat another human being. From the next day, they started taking the bodies a bit farther away to cut them, so that these 5 people would not have to see it or feel more pain. Around this time, a boy named Numa found a suitcase buried in the snow. When they opened the suitcase, they found a radio inside. When they switched on the radio, they found that there was no signal. So they gathered some materials and made an antenna. Using this antenna, they finally caught a news broadcast. The news said that the government had conducted many rescue operations to find them and had sent around 66 aircraft to search for them. But after so many efforts, when there was still no trace of them, the government officially declared them dead. Because of this, the authorities had stopped searching for them. Hearing this, the courage of the entire group broke. Every hope of survival they had left was crushed. Among the 5 people who had refused to eat human flesh, 4 now agreed to eat it because they understood that no one was going to help them. If they wanted to get out of there, they would have to do something themselves. Now, 3 people from the group decided once again to go and look for the rear part of the plane and bring back the batteries so that they could try to contact the outside world and tell them that they were still alive. These 3 set off in search of the back section of the plane. After walking for many hours, they found some pieces of the aircraft. They picked them up and also found the body of the player who had separated from them at the time of the crash. They buried his body and continued their journey because now they were sure that the rear part of the plane must be somewhere nearby. After hours of climbing, they became extremely tired and the icy winds made it hard for them to even breathe. Soon it became night and they decided to spend the night sheltered behind a large rock. The next morning when they woke up, they were covered in snow. All 3 of them were in terrible condition. The cold was so intense that one man's eyes had practically frozen and the other 2 were not even able to stand on their feet. They had no strength left to move forward, so they sat on a metal panel from the plane and slid down the mountain back to the crash site. Seeing them return empty-handed, sadness spread through the entire group. The last man who had still refused to eat human flesh finally also gave in and ate it, then went to sleep, cursing his own fate. Days kept passing like this, and somehow they managed to survive for 17 days. But there was another problem. For the last 5 days, the weather outside had been very bad. To avoid the storm, all of them were sitting inside the plane when a huge storm suddenly came and filled the inside of the aircraft with snow. Many people were buried under the snow. The few who remained on top were extremely frightened by this accident, but they gathered their courage and started digging out the snow to rescue those buried underneath. They managed to pull everyone out in time, except one girl who had been buried too deep in the snow. She suffocated and died. Everyone was extremely shaken and had not yet recovered from this tragedy when they began hearing strange sounds from outside. When they looked out, they saw that another powerful storm was heading towards them, even stronger than the previous one. Another storm hit, and once again they were all buried under the snow. The storm was so strong that the entire plane filled with snow. Some people died on the spot. Those who were trapped inside now had no way out. One of the survivors quickly made a hole in the roof of the plane so that they could get oxygen and avoid suffocating to death. They all prayed that no more snow would fall on them, or else they would be buried there forever. After a few hours, they pulled themselves together and gathered 8 dead bodies, placing them in one corner. In this way, they had now been trapped there for 18 days, and their hunger had become unbearable. Now there was only one way to stay alive. They had to eat the meat of the dead bodies inside. But this was extremely difficult for them because all these bodies belonged to their own people. Seeing all this, the boy Numa lost control. In anger, he began breaking one of the plane windows. During this, a piece of glass pierced his leg. Even then, he did not stop. He kept digging through the snow. After 2 full days of hard work, they managed to make an opening above them. Through this, they all came out. When they stepped outside, they were so happy that it felt as if they had been freed from a prison of death. They celebrated the fact that they were still alive and then started digging away the snow to uncover the plane. During this time, Numa noticed that the wound on his leg no longer hurt because the ice had numbed it. He did not pay much attention to it and continued digging. Now the sun was out in the sky and it was easier to dig through the snow. Within a few hours, the aircraft was visible again. Since the sunlight was good, they all started thinking again about going to search for the rear part of the plane, but they had no idea how they would survive the freezing nights during that climb. So they decided to wait a little longer because summer was coming and the climb would be slightly easier during that time. Day by day, time kept passing and 34 days had now gone by. The weather was now slightly better than before. The people who had first gone in search of the plane's rear section were still very weak and not in any condition to climb again. A few hours later, they learned that another one of their companions had died of hunger. Seeing this, everyone became deeply depressed and buried him in the snow. 2 more days passed like this, and on the 36th day, they decided that if they wanted to save their lives, they would have to bring batteries from the rear part of the aircraft and inform the outside world. Otherwise, they would all die one by one. So 4 people from the group decided to climb up again. Their names were Roberto, Tintin, Numa, and Nando. They wore many layers of clothes to protect themselves from the cold and set off in search of the plane's rear section. But even after walking for many hours, they still could not see their plane. Then Numa's condition suddenly worsened and he collapsed. The others saw that the infection in his leg wound had spread, so they decided to take Numa back down. But Numa refused. He chose to go back alone and told the others to continue forward. Numa somehow returned to the crashed plane, but his condition was so bad that he fainted as soon as he arrived. When he regained consciousness, he saw that his companions were trying to clear the snow from around the aircraft. He wanted to help them, but he was so weak that he could not even move. Meanwhile, the other 3 continued their journey for many hours and finally reached the place where the rear part of the plane had hit the rocks and broken off. Seeing it, they became very happy and went near it. As they searched through this section of the aircraft, they found not only the batteries but also many other things. Lots of clothes, bottles of rum, and several packets of cigarettes. They took all this stuff and went back to their crashed plane. There, they connected the battery to the plane's radio and tried to contact the outside world. But unfortunately, the radio was damaged. In this way, their last hope was also destroyed. On the other side, Numa's condition was getting worse. The infection had now spread throughout his body. The food they had found in the plane was also finished. So once again, they started eating human meat. Numa stopped eating and drinking so that more food would be left for the others, because he knew that he was not going to survive. Some members of the group went once more to the rear part of the plane, hoping to find something useful. This time, luck was on their side. They found a large waterproof sheet and stitched it together to make a sleeping bag. Then they heard a news report on the radio. It said that after 58 days had passed since the crash, the government would launch one last mission to search for the survivors. Hearing this, life returned to their faces, and a small spark of hope for survival appeared again. Some people said they should stay where they were and wait for the rescue team. Others argued that if they remained in that same hidden valley, nobody would ever see them, so some of them should set out on foot to find help. That night, Numa's condition became very serious. He was taking the last breaths of his life. Before dying, he told everyone, "When I die, you all can use my body as your food." Saying these words, Numa died. Numa's last words gave everyone courage. They also found a letter near his body. In that letter, Numa had written that he was very happy to die among his friends, because he could not have wished for a better death. After reading Numa's letter, a new energy arose inside everyone. 3 people from the group set out once again in search of help. They took the sleeping bag and a lot of food with them and began their journey. This time, the 3 of them had decided that no matter what happened, they would cross those mountains and reach Chile to bring help for everyone. They climbed without resting, and when night came, they slept inside the sleeping bag. The next morning, they resumed their climb and finally reached the top of the mountain. But the view from the top broke their spirits. There were mountains upon mountains stretching out in front of them. This meant that they still had a very long way to go. They thought of turning back because they did not have enough food for 3 people to complete such a journey. At this point, Tintin gave all his food to the other 2 and went back by himself so that the remaining 2 could complete the journey more easily. The path ahead was very long and full of challenges, but the 2 of them did not give up. They kept moving forward. Finally, after walking continuously for 10 days, their hard work paid off. They reached an area where there was much less snow than above. They also found a clear river of fresh water. They stopped there and drank as much water as they wanted. Then something happened that nobody had expected. They saw a man on horseback standing on the other side of the river. At first, they could not believe their eyes. They thought they were dreaming, but soon they realized that this was not an illusion. It was a real human being. Seeing that man, their happiness knew no bounds. They started shouting loudly and asking him for help, but the man could not understand them because he was far away, and the sound of the flowing water drowned their voices. So he threw a piece of paper and a pencil across the river so that they could write down their message. The 2 survivors wrote their whole story on that paper. After reading what was written, the man took the paper and went straight to the government officers. There, the officials learned that some of the people from the plane crash they had declared dead 2 months earlier were actually still alive. As soon as this news reached them, the government launched a mission to rescue everyone. The man took Roberto and Nando to his home, where they ate until their stomachs were full. Now this news spread across the city like wildfire. Very soon reporters began gathering there. Meanwhile, the people trapped in the snowy mountains also heard this news on the radio and started jumping with joy. After that, they washed their faces and packed their belongings. Soon the rescue team arrived at the crash site with Roberto and Nando. After 72 days of the plane crash, those people were brought back to the city, where they were reunited with their families. The people of the city welcomed them like heroes. All of them were then admitted to a hospital. There they helped bathe each other, and then each person was given a separate bed. But that night they still slept close to each other, because after this tragedy they were all in deep shock. At the end of the story, we learned that there were 45 people traveling on this plane. Out of them, only 16 survived. With this, the film based on this true story comes to an end.